The snow bit into Astrid's bare feet like the teeth of wolves, each step a fresh agony that shot up through her frozen legs and settled deep in her bones. She stumbled over a hidden root, her swollen belly throwing off her balance, and caught herself against the rough bark of a pine tree. The impact sent a shower of ice crystals cascading down onto her thin nightgown, the same gown she'd been wearing when Fenris had dragged her from their bed and thrown her at Kale's feet like a piece of rotting meat. Keep moving, or die. Her wolf, that inner presence that had been silent since she was a child, offered nothing. No guidance, no surge of strength, no primal instinct to help her survive. She remembered her mother's hands on her forehead, the strange words whispered in a language Astrid had never understood, the burning sensation that had spread through her chest before her wolf went quiet forever. To protect you, her mother had said. Someday you'll understand. She never had. She was alone in the frozen darkness of the northern woods, pregnant and abandoned, with nothing but her own failing body to carry her forward. Behind her, she heard the howl. Kale. He was hunting her. Astrid pushed off from the tree and forced her numb legs to move faster. The forest stretched endlessly before her, a maze of black trunks and white drifts that all looked the same in the pale moonlight. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't go back. The memory rose unbidden. Fenris's cold blue eyes as he'd addressed the gathered pack, his voice carrying the weight of an alpha's authority. This child is not mine. I reject this female as my mate. The words had struck her like physical blows, each one driving the air from her lungs. She'd stood there in shock, her hand pressed protectively over her belly, unable to process what was happening. But the child is his. The child is his. How can he not know that? She'd tried to speak, tried to protest, but Fenris had already turned away from her. She's yours now, Kale. A gift for your loyal service. Do with her what you will. Kale had smiled then, a slow, hungry expression that made her stomach turn. He was bigger than Fenris, broader in the shoulders, with hands like slabs of granite and eyes that held no warmth, no mercy. He'd looked at her the way a predator looks at wounded prey, already calculating how best to tear her apart. "Oh, I will," Kale had said, and the gathered wolves had laughed. Now that laughter echoed in her ears as she ran, mixing with the sound of her own ragged breathing and the crunch of snow beneath her bleeding feet. She'd managed to slip away while Kyle was distracted by the celebration of his new gift, but she'd had no time to grab clothes or supplies. She had nothing but the nightgown on her back and the child growing in her womb. I'm going to die out here. The thought was strangely calm, almost peaceful. Maybe death in the snow would be better than what Kale had planned for her. She'd seen the way he treated the Omega wolves in Fenris's pack, the bruises they tried to hide, the way they flinched when he walked by. She would not let him do those things to her. She would not let him touch her child. Another howl split the night, closer now. Astrid's heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to run faster, but her body was failing her. The cold had seeped into her muscles, turning them stiff and clumsy. Her lungs burned with each breath of frozen air. The baby shifted inside her, a flutter of movement that reminded her she wasn't just fighting for herself. Please, please let me find somewhere safe. She didn't know who she was praying to. The moon goddess who had abandoned her? The spirits of the forest? Anyone who might listen to a desperate, discarded Omega with nothing left to lose? The trees began to thin ahead, and Astrid's heart leaped with desperate hope. Maybe there was a road, a house, some sign of civilization where she might find shelter. She pushed through a gap between two massive pines and stumbled into a clearing, and froze. A massive stone marker rose from the snow, carved with symbols she recognized from the old stories her mother used to tell. A boundary stone, a territorial marker. Stoneheart. The word whispered through her mind like a warning. Everyone knew about the Stoneheart Pack, the largest territory in the northern kingdoms, ruled by an Alpha King who had held power for nearly 2 centuries. An Alpha King who, according to rumor, was as cold and merciless as the mountains that surrounded his domain. An alpha king who had refused to take a mate for 10 years because of some prophecy that said his true mate would be his destruction. Astrid stood at the boundary, swaying on her frozen feet, and faced an impossible choice. Behind her was Chaol and certain brutality. Ahead was unknown territory ruled by a wolf who might kill her simply for trespassing. Another howl pierced the night, close, so close, and the choice was made for her. She crossed the boundary. The change was immediate and visceral. The moment she stepped past the stone marker, Astrid felt something shift in the air around her. The Stoneheart territory had its own presence, its own power, and it pressed against her skin like the weight of a watching gaze. She was an intruder here, an uninvited Omega stumbling through lands that belonged to another Alpha. They'll find me. They'll catch me and send me back, or they'll kill me themselves. But she kept moving, because stopping meant death, and some stubborn spark inside her refused to simply lie down in the snow and let the cold take her. She had survived Fenris's rejection. She had survived Chaol's hungry eyes. She would survive this too. Somehow. Some way. The forest grew denser as she moved deeper into Stoneheart territory, the trees pressing close on either side like dark sentinels. Astrid's vision was beginning to blur, the edges of the world going soft and gray. Hypothermia. She recognized the signs from the healing lessons she'd learned as a young girl, before her wolf had gone dormant, before her mother had done whatever she'd done to silence it, and she'd been relegated to the lowest ranks of her birth pack. I need to find shelter. I need to get warm. But there was no shelter here. Only endless trees and endless snow and the endless cold that was slowly stealing the feeling from her limbs. She couldn't feel her feet anymore. She couldn't feel her hands. The only warmth left in her body was the small, precious heat of the child in her womb. I'm sorry, little one. I'm so sorry. She thought of all the things she would never get to do. She would never hold her baby in her arms. She would never see their first smile, hear their first laugh, watch them take their first steps. She would never know if they inherited her dark hair or Fenris's cold blue eyes. She would never get to tell them that they were loved, desperately loved, even if their father had thrown them both away. A sob caught in her throat, but she was too cold for tears. Her foot caught on something hidden beneath the snow, and this time she couldn't catch herself. She fell hard, the impact jarring through her body, and she felt the baby kick in protest. The snow was surprisingly soft beneath her, almost welcoming, and suddenly she was so tired, so impossibly, overwhelmingly tired. Just for a moment. I'll just rest for a moment. She knew she shouldn't close her eyes. She knew that if she slept, she would never wake up. But her body was beyond her control now, shutting down one system at a time as it struggled to keep her core warm enough for the child to survive. The last thing she saw before the darkness claimed her was movement among the trees, massive shapes with glowing eyes, closing in on her like the wolves in a nightmare. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. And then, there was nothing. She drifted in the dark space between life and death, neither asleep nor awake, aware of nothing but the cold and the distant echo of voices she couldn't understand. Trespasser, my king. Found her collapsed at the eastern boundary. She's pregnant, barely alive. We need to get her to the healers. Smell of the Silverbrook pack on her. Could be a spy. The voices washed over her like water, meaningless and distant. She was warm now, finally warm, and that seemed important somehow. Something was pressed against her. Fur, maybe, or fabric, and the terrible cold that had invaded her bones was slowly receding. She's waking up. Astrid's eyes fluttered open, and the world came back into focus in fragments. A stone ceiling arched high above her, carved with intricate patterns that caught the flickering light of a dozen candles. She was lying on something soft. A bed, she realized. An actual bed with blankets and pillows and warmth. For a long moment she could only stare at the ceiling and try to remember how she had gotten here. The snow, the forest, the wolves with the glowing eyes. She tried to sit up, and a gentle hand pressed against her shoulder. Easy. Don't try to move too quickly. The voice belonged to an older woman with silver hair braided back from a kind face. She wore the practical clothing of a healer, and her eyes held the particular warmth of someone who had spent decades caring for the sick and injured. "Where am I?" Astrid's voice came out as a rasp, her throat raw and burning. "You're in the healer's wing of Stoneheart Castle." The woman pressed a cup of warm liquid into Astrid's hands. "Drink. It will help with the cold damage." Astrid drank without questioning, too desperate for warmth to care what it was. The liquid spread through her body like liquid sunlight, chasing away the last remnants of the killing cold. When the cup was empty, she clutched it against her chest and tried to make sense of her situation. "How long have I been here?" 2 days. We weren't sure you were going to survive." The healer's eyes dropped to Astrid's belly. "You're lucky the child is strong. They held on through the worst of it." 2 days. Astrid's heart lurched. Kale would have tracked her to the boundary by now. He would know she'd entered Stoneheart territory. If he demanded her return, if he had any claim on her at all. "Please." The word came out before she could stop it, desperate and broken. "Please don't send me back. I'll do anything. I'll work in the kitchens, the stables, I'll scrub floors on my hands and knees. Just please don't send me back to them." The healer's expression softened with sympathy that Astrid didn't trust. In her experience, sympathy was just the prelude to being told there was nothing anyone could do. "That decision isn't mine to make," the healer said gently. "The Alpha King will want to speak with you now that you're awake. He'll decide what happens next." The Alpha King. Fear coiled in Astrid's stomach like a living thing. She had fled one Alpha's cruelty only to fall into the hands of another, one who, by all accounts, was even more powerful and far less forgiving. What would he do with a pregnant trespasser from a rival pack? Execute her? Return her to Fenris as a gesture of good faith? Or perhaps keep her as a prisoner, a bargaining chip to be traded away when she was no longer useful? He's not what the rumors say. The healer seemed to read her thoughts. He's scarred, yes. Remote. But he's not cruel, child. I've served him for 40 years, and I've never once seen him harm someone who didn't deserve it. Before Astrid could respond, she felt it. A presence. A weight in the air that made the candle flames shiver and the shadows deepen in the corners of the room. Her skin prickled with awareness, every nerve ending suddenly alive and screaming. Something was approaching. Someone. And her body recognized them in a way she couldn't explain. The healer rose to her feet, her face carefully neutral. "He's here." The door opened. The man who stood in the doorway was the largest Alpha Astrid had ever seen. He had to duck his head to pass through the frame, his broad shoulders nearly brushing the sides. Scars mapped the left side of his face, pale lines that pulled at the corner of his mouth and disappeared beneath the collar of his dark tunic. His hair was black, shot through with silver, and his eyes. Heat exploded through Astrid's chest. It started at her heart and radiated outward, flooding through her veins like liquid fire, and somewhere deep inside her, in that silent, empty place where her wolf had slumbered for so many years, something woke up. Mate. The word tore through her consciousness with the force of a thunderclap. Her wolf, dormant since childhood, surged to life with a howl that echoed through every fiber of her being. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She could only stare at the massive Alpha who had frozen in the doorway, his own eyes blazing molten gold as his chest heaved with a sharp, violent inhale. No, this isn't possible. This can't be happening. But her body knew the truth, even if her mind refused to accept it. The mate bond was already forming, wrapping around her like chains of invisible fire. She could feel his heartbeat thundering against her own ribs, as if it had taken up residence inside her chest. She could feel his shock, his resistance, his desperate attempt to deny what was happening between them. A raw growl tore from his scarred throat, a sound of anguish as much as recognition. His massive hands shot out to grip the doorframe, and Astrid heard the wood splinter under the force of his grip. His eyes, still burning gold, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her want to both flee and crawl toward him at the same time. No. His voice was rough, tortured, edged with a pain that seemed too old and too deep to have anything to do with this moment. Not you. Anyone but you. The words should have hurt. Maybe they did hurt, somewhere beneath the overwhelming chaos of the mate bond. But Astrid was beyond processing pain or rejection. She could only sit there, clutching the empty cup to her chest and stare at the Alpha King who was apparently destined to be her destruction, and she his. What happens now? The question hung in the air between them, unspoken but deafening. She was a pregnant Omega who had been given away twice. He was a scarred Alpha King bound by a prophecy that said his true mate would destroy him. They were standing at the beginning of something neither of them wanted, something neither of them could control. And somewhere in the castle above them, the howl of approaching wolves announced that her past was about to catch up with her. The howl echoed through the stone corridors, and Astrid watched the Alpha King's expression shift from tortured recognition to something far more dangerous. His golden eyes, still blazing with the fire of the mate bond, hardened into chips of amber ice. The muscles in his jaw tightened, and the wood beneath his grip cracked again, splinters falling to the floor like snowflakes. How many? His voice was low, controlled, but Astrid could feel the rage beneath it through the bond that now connected them. It was like standing too close to a forge, heat rolling off him in waves that made her skin prickle. A guard appeared behind him, breathless. 3 wolves, my king. They've stopped at the eastern gate and are demanding an audience. They claim we're harboring stolen property. Stolen property. The words hit Astrid like a physical blow. She pressed her hand against her belly, feeling the baby shift inside her, and fought down the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. Even here, even in the territory of the most powerful Alpha in the northern kingdoms, she was nothing more than a thing to be claimed and discarded. But the Alpha King, Bastion, she remembered now, Bastion Stoneheart, turned his head slightly, and she felt something pulse through the bond. Not quite protectiveness. Not yet. But awareness. A primal acknowledgement that what was his could not be touched. Stolen property. He repeated the words slowly, tasting them like poison. And what property would that be? They say... The guard hesitated, glancing at Astrid. They say the pregnant female belongs to Beta Kale of the Silverbrook Pack, that she was given to him by Alpha Fenris and fled before the claiming could be completed. The claiming. Astrid's throat tightened. She knew what that meant. She knew exactly what Kale had planned to do to her before she'd managed to slip away into the frozen night. The memory of his hands on her arms, his breath hot against her neck, as he'd whispered all the things he was going to do once the celebration was over, made her skin crawl. She is not property. Bastion's voice dropped to a growl that resonated through the stone walls. She is a guest under my protection. Tell these wolves from Silverbrook that if they wish to challenge that protection, they may do so at dawn in the fighting pit. The guard's eyes widened. My king, if we kill emissaries from Silverbrook, I said if they wish to challenge. Bastion finally released the shattered doorframe and stepped fully into the room. Each step brought him closer to Astrid's bed, and she felt the mate bond tighten with every inch of distance he closed. I did not say I would fight them. I suspect they'll reconsider their position when they realize what they're truly asking for. He stopped at the foot of her bed, and for a long moment, he simply looked at her. The healer had quietly retreated to the corner of the room, busying herself with herbs and bandages, giving them what privacy she could. But Astrid barely noticed. Every fiber of her being was focused on the massive alpha who stood before her, his scarred face unreadable, his golden eyes slowly fading back to their natural color. A deep, forest green that reminded her of pine needles after rain. You ran from them. It wasn't a question. Yes. Her voice was stronger than she expected. The warmth of the bond was still spreading through her, chasing away the last of the cold that had settled in her bones. My mate. The word stuck in her throat. Fenris rejected me. He said the child wasn't his and gave me to his beta. I ran before Kale could. She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Something flickered in Bastian's eyes. Not sympathy. He didn't seem like a man who dealt in sympathy, but understanding. Recognition of a particular kind of cruelty that transcended words. The child is his. It wasn't a question either. Yes. Astrid's hand pressed harder against her belly. I was always faithful. I don't understand why he... It doesn't matter why. Bastian's voice was flat, final. What matters is that you are here now, under my protection, and no wolf from Silverbrook will touch you. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they sent a fresh wave of fear through Astrid's chest. She was under his protection, but at what cost? The mate bond was pulling at her, demanding things she couldn't give, promising things she couldn't accept. She was already pregnant with another alpha's child. She had already been rejected and discarded once. What possible use could the scarred Alpha King have for a broken Omega like her? Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. You don't know me. You owe me nothing. Why would you protect me from them? Bastian's jaw tightened. For a moment, he looked away, staring at the candle flames as if they held some answer he couldn't find in her face. Because I am not Fenris. His voice was rough, edged with something that might have been old pain. Because what was done to you is an abomination. Because no wolf, no person, should be treated as property to be given away at another's whim. He paused, and when he looked at her again, the gold was flickering in his eyes once more. And because the moon goddess has apparently decided that you are my mate, which means, whether either of us likes it, your fate is now tangled with mine. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither of them was ready to address. Astrid felt her wolf stirring again, that long-dormant presence that was slowly stretching awake after years of silence. Her wolf wanted to go to him, wanted to press against him, breathe in his scent, accept the bond that was already forming between them. But Astrid was not her wolf. The prophecy, she said quietly. The healer mentioned it. They say your true mate will be your destruction. Bastian's expression didn't change, but she felt something shift in the bond. A wall going up, a barrier forming between what he felt and what he allowed himself to feel. Yes. The word was clipped, controlled. The prophecy has hung over me for 10 years. It's why I never took a mate. Why I've kept my distance from every female who might have sparked the bond. His laugh was bitter, hollow. It seems the moon goddess has a sense of humor. She waited until I had convinced myself I was safe, and then she sent me you, a pregnant, abandoned Omega who collapsed at my border half dead from cold. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but Astrid didn't know what else to say. I didn't ask for this either. I didn't ask to be rejected or given away or to be your mate. No. Bastian's voice softened slightly. No, you didn't. And that's precisely why I find myself unable to turn you away. He turned to leave, and Astrid felt the mate bond stretch between them like a physical cord. The pull was almost painful, her wolf howling in protest at the distance, demanding that she call him back, that she not let him walk away. But at the door, he paused. Rest now, heal. The wolves from Silverbrook will be dealt with, and tomorrow... He hesitated, and for just a moment, He looked less like a fearsome alpha king and more like a man facing something he didn't know how to fight. Tomorrow, we will discuss what happens next. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that seemed to echo through the room. Astrid released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Well? The healer's voice was carefully neutral as she approached the bed with fresh bandages. That was unexpected. Is it always like this? Astrid asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The mate bond. Is it always so overwhelming? The healer smiled slightly. It can be, especially when both parties are fighting it. She began unwrapping the bandages around Astrid's frost-damaged feet, her touch gentle but efficient. He hasn't allowed anyone close in a very long time, you know, not since the prophecy was revealed. He's convinced that loving anyone will only bring them, and himself, to ruin. Maybe he's right. Astrid stared at the door, still feeling the ghost of his presence in the room. Maybe I am his destruction. Look at me. I've already brought wolves to his gates. I've already brought conflict and trouble to his territory. Perhaps. The healer's hands paused in their work. Or perhaps the prophecy meant something else entirely. Prophecies have a way of twisting themselves, child. They rarely mean what we think they mean. She resumed her work, her voice thoughtful. I've read the old texts about the Windrider line, back when we still had them in the library. Their binding magic was unique. It could only be broken by a true mate bond, the kind recognized by the moon goddess herself. Some scholars believed it was intentional, a failsafe built into the magic, so that if a Windrider was ever hidden, their destined mate could still find them. Astrid wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe there was some version of this story where she wasn't a harbinger of doom for the only alpha who had ever looked at her and seen something other than property. But hope was a dangerous thing. She had learned that lesson well. The hours passed slowly. Astrid drifted in and out of sleep, her dreams haunted by golden eyes and the echo of howling wolves. The healer came and went, bringing food and medicine and quiet assurances that the wolves from Silverbrook had retreated after Bastion's challenge, their confidence apparently shaken by the prospect of facing the Alpha King in combat. By nightfall, Astrid was feeling stronger. The cold damage to her feet and hands was healing with supernatural speed, likely due to the strange warmth that now lived in her chest, a constant reminder of the bond she shared with Bastion Stoneheart. She was able to sit up without help, to eat solid food, to examine the stone chamber that had become her sanctuary. It was a beautiful room, she realized, not lavish, but comfortable, built for function rather than display. The bed was covered in thick furs that held heat like embers. The walls were carved with intricate patterns of running wolves and soaring mountains. A fireplace crackled in the corner, filling the air with the scent of cedar and pine. A knock at the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, expecting the healer. But it wasn't the healer who entered. Bastion Stoneheart stood in the doorway, a covered tray in his hands. He was dressed simply now, dark trousers and a loose shirt that did nothing to hide the massive breadth of his shoulders. His scarred face was neutral, but his green eyes held something she couldn't quite identify. "I brought food." He said it almost stiffly, as if the words themselves were foreign to him. Astrid blinked. "You brought me food? The healer said you were recovering well. I thought you might be hungry." He crossed the room and set the tray on the table beside her bed. Then, without meeting her eyes, he moved to the chair by the fireplace, as far from her as the room would allow, and sat with his back partially turned to her. "Eat." His voice was gruff. "You need to regain your strength." Astrid stared at his broad back for a long moment, completely confused. She had expected him to... What? Demand she accept the mate bond? Press his claim on her? Try to touch her? To establish dominance? To make it clear that she was in his territory and subject to his will? Instead, he sat with his back to her, giving her space, giving her privacy to eat without feeling watched, treating her like a person, like a guest, not like property. She lifted the cover on the tray and found warm bread, roasted meat, a bowl of thick stew, and a cup of something that smelled like honey and herbs. Simple food, but hearty and nourishing, the kind of meal that would help a body heal. Why? The question escaped her again, unbidden. Because you need to eat. No, I mean, she struggled to find the words. Why are you here? Why did you bring this yourself? You're the Alpha King. You must have servants for this. A long silence stretched between them. The fire crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls. I am aware that I am difficult to be around. His voice was low, measured. The mate bond creates certain expectations, certain pressures. I wanted you to understand that I have no intention of forcing anything on you. He paused, his shoulders tensing beneath his shirt. You have been given away twice by men who should have protected you. I will not be the third. The bond may demand things of us both, but I will not act on it without your consent. Whatever happens between us, if anything happens at all, will be your choice. Only your choice. Astrid's hands trembled as she reached for the bread. She tore off a piece and chewed slowly, trying to process his words. Her experience with alphas was limited to Fenris, cold, controlling Fenris, who had always made it clear that her purpose was to serve him, to please him, to give him heirs. The idea that an alpha might offer her choice, might give her space, might care whether she consented. You're different, she said quietly, from what I expected. I am what 10 years of isolation have made me. There was no self-pity in his voice, only statement of fact. The prophecy has kept me distant from my pack, from my advisors, from anyone who might ignite the mate bond. I have become accustomed to solitude. I have forgotten how to be close. Astrid took another bite of bread, watching the firelight play across his shoulders. The connection between them carried his loneliness like a current, a vast, aching emptiness that had settled into his bones like cold into stone. He had spent a decade building walls around himself, convinced that connection meant destruction. Why did you never try to find a way around it? She asked. The prophecy, I mean. Some prophecies can be broken or redirected. I consulted every seer in the northern kingdoms. His voice was bitter. Every witch, every oracle, every wise woman who claimed to speak for the moon goddess. They all said the same thing. The words cannot be changed. My true mate will be my destruction. And yet you're protecting me, feeding me, giving me choices. She set down the bread and stared at his back. If you believe I'll destroy you, why aren't you sending me away? Another silence, longer this time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that might have been vulnerability. Because the bond has already formed. Sending you away will not prevent the prophecy from unfolding. It will only ensure that I face whatever comes alone. A pause. And because I find myself unable to look at you and see destruction, I see only a woman who has survived more than she should have had to. A woman who ran through a frozen forest to protect her child. A woman who deserves better than what fate has given her. Astrid's throat tightened. When was the last time anyone had seen her? Really seen her, rather than just seeing what she could offer? The child, she said hesitantly. The baby I'm carrying, it's not yours. Most alphas wouldn't accept another male's child as part of a mating. They would demand. I am not most alphas. His voice was sharp enough to cut glass. And any child raised in my territory is under my protection, regardless of blood. If you choose to stay, and I want to be clear that you do have that choice, your child will be cared for, provided for, protected. Something cracked inside Astrid's chest, a wall she hadn't even known she'd built, crumbling under the weight of his unexpected kindness. Eat, he said again, his voice softening slightly. You're carrying a life inside you. Both of you need strength. She ate. And as she ate, she felt something shift inside her. Not acceptance. She wasn't ready for that. But perhaps the first fragile stirrings of hope. Morning came with the sound of raised voices. Astrid had slept deeply for the first time since fleeing Silverbrook, wrapped in the warm furs of the healer's bed, with the constant presence of the mate bond humming in her chest like a second heartbeat. She woke to the healer's hand on her shoulder and the older woman's worried expression. The council has been called, the healer said quietly. There's been a demand from the Silverbrook pack. You should know. It may affect your situation. Astrid was on her feet before she fully registered what she was doing. The baby shifted in protest at the sudden movement, but she was already reaching for the simple dress that had been laid out for her. Gray wool, warm and practical, fit for a woman who was no one important. Where is the council chamber? My lady, you shouldn't… Where? The healer hesitated, then pointed. Up the east staircase, second door on the left. But my lady, the Alpha King may not want… Astrid was already moving. She found the council chamber by following the sound of voices, loud, argumentative, punctuated by occasional growls that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. The door was heavy oak bound with iron, and she pressed her ear against it before she could think better of it. Return her immediately or face the consequences. Fenris has threatened to bring the matter before the Council of Alphas. Let him. Bastion's voice was ice and steel. The Council of Alphas has no jurisdiction over who I choose to shelter in my territory. But the precedent, my king, if you refuse to return property that rightfully belongs to… She is not property. The words were followed by a crash, wood splintering, something heavy hitting the floor. She is a person, a pregnant woman who was given away like a broodmare by a mate who should have protected her. I will not return her to that fate. With respect, my king, you cannot go to war over an Omega. She's not even of noble blood. She's no one. Astrid's hand found the door handle. She didn't remember deciding to open it, but suddenly she was standing in the entrance to the council chamber, facing a room full of startled faces. The chamber was large and imposing, built for the kind of formal gatherings that decided the fate of kingdoms. A massive oak table dominated the center, surrounded by chairs filled with older wolves in fine clothing, advisors and nobles, she assumed, the kind of powerful figures who whispered in kings' ears. At the head of the table, Bastion stood with his fist embedded in the now shattered surface, splinters scattered across documents and maps. Every eye in the room turned to her. The Omega, someone muttered. What is she doing here? But Astrid wasn't looking at the council members. She was looking at Bastion. His eyes met hers, and she felt the mate bond flare between them like lightning. He didn't tell her to leave. He didn't order her removed. He simply stood there, watching, waiting to see what she would do. I am no one, Astrid said, her voice stronger than she felt. You're right about that. I'm an Omega with no rank, no status, no power. I was given away twice by men who saw me as nothing more than a vessel for their heirs. She stepped further into the room, her chin lifting. But I am also a woman carrying a child who deserves to live free. I am a person who has done nothing wrong except refuse to be claimed by a man I did not choose. If that makes me property to be returned, then perhaps this council should reconsider what it means to be civilized. Silence fell over the chamber like snow. One of the older advisors, a gray-haired male with cold blue eyes, leaned forward. And who are you to address this council girl? You have no standing here, no right to speak. She has every right. Bastion's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stands under my protection. That gives her the right to speak in any chamber of my castle. She is no one. She is my mate. The words dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Ripples of shock spread through the council members, whispers breaking out like wildfire. Astrid felt her heart stutter in her chest. He hadn't meant to say it. She sensed his surprise ripple through their link, his frustration at letting the truth slip. But he didn't take it back. Your mate? The gray-haired advisor's voice was sharp with disbelief. My king. The prophecy. I am aware of the prophecy. Bastian's voice was deadly calm. I am also aware that this woman is my mate, recognized by the moon goddess herself. The bond was formed the moment I entered the healer's chamber. There is no changing it, no denying it, no running from it. Then you mean to claim her? Despite the prophecy? Despite the child she carries? Bastian's jaw tightened. What I mean to do is my concern, not yours. What I will tell you is this. Any wolf who touches her, threatens her, or attempts to return her to Silverbrook will answer to me personally. Is that clear? The silence was answer enough. Good. Bastian straightened, removing his fist from the shattered table. This council is dismissed. We will discuss the situation with Silverbrook another time. The advisors rose, gathering their papers and casting uncertain glances between Astrid and their king. As they filed out, their whispers followed them like shadows. Pregnant with another Alpha's child. The prophecy says his destruction. What was the moon goddess thinking? When the last advisor had gone, the chamber fell quiet. Astrid stood frozen in the doorway, acutely aware of the massive Alpha on the other side of the ruined table. You didn't have to do that, she said finally. Claim me publicly. It will only make things more complicated. It was the truth. His voice was rough. The council needed to understand that you are not a pawn to be traded away. You are under my protection not because I choose to be merciful, but because the moon goddess has bound us together. But the prophecy is my burden to bear. He moved around the table, approaching her slowly, as if she were a wild animal he didn't want to startle. It has nothing to do with how you are treated here. Whatever happens between us, whatever the prophecy means, you will be safe. Your child will be safe. That is my promise to you. Astrid felt something shift inside her chest. The wall she had felt crumbling the night before crumbled a little more, letting in light she hadn't felt in years. Why? She whispered. Why do you keep protecting me? You barely know me. Bastian stopped an arm's length away. His green eyes, flecked with gold, searched her face as if looking for something he couldn't name. Because I have spent 10 years running from this moment, he said quietly. 10 years hiding from the bond, from connection, from anything that might bring the prophecy to pass. And now that it's here, now that you're here, I find that I'm tired of running. His hand rose, hesitating in the air between them. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if you'll destroy me or if I'll somehow survive this. But I do know that you've been hurt enough. And if I have any power in this world, I will use it to make sure you're never hurt again. His fingers brushed her cheek. Just a whisper of contact. Barely there. But Astrid felt it through the bond like a thunderclap. Warmth. Safety. The first tentative thread of something that might someday become trust. She didn't pull away. And when his hand fell back to his side, she saw something in his scarred face that looked almost like hope. The warmth of his touch lingered on her cheek long after he'd pulled away. Astrid stood in the council chamber, surrounded by the debris of shattered wood and scattered papers, her heart beating a rhythm she didn't recognize. Something new, something dangerous. Bastian had turned away, his broad shoulders tense beneath the dark leather of his vest. His internal struggle echoed through their connection, the war between what he wanted and what he feared. It pulsed against her consciousness like a second heartbeat, intimate and invasive, and strangely comforting. I should return to my chambers, she said softly, though she made no move to leave. I'll have Mira bring you something to eat. His voice was rough, strained. You need to keep your strength up. For the child. The child. Her hand moved instinctively to the gentle swell of her belly, where new life grew despite everything. Despite Fenris's betrayal. Despite Kale's cruelty. Despite the chaos that had become her existence. This tiny being inside her had survived it all, clinging to life with a determination that Astrid was only beginning to understand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything you said. For standing up for me when you didn't have to." Bastian glanced back at her, and the raw emotion in his green eyes made her breath catch. "I will always stand up for you, Astrid. That is what it means to be bound by the goddess." Before she could respond, the chamber doors burst open with a force that sent splinters flying across the stone floor. A young wolf, barely more than a boy, with wild eyes and labored breathing, stumbled into the room, dropping to one knee before the Alpha King. "My king," he gasped. "Urgent news from the border. A messenger from the Nightshade Pack requests an audience. He carries a formal declaration and refuses to leave until he speaks with you directly." Bastian's entire demeanor shifted. The vulnerability she'd glimpsed moments ago vanished behind a mask of cold authority, his features hardening into the face of a king prepared for war. Through the bond, Astrid felt a spike of something that made her blood run cold. Fear, not for himself, but for her. "The Nightshade Pack," Bastian repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "What does Lucian want with Stoneheart?" I don't know, my king. The messenger would only say that it concerns a matter of great urgency. Something about property that was stolen from an allied pack." Property. The word hit Astrid like a physical blow. She knew, with sickening certainty, exactly what property Lucian Nightshade was referring to. Bastian's eyes found hers across the chamber, and she saw her own dawning horror reflected in his gaze. "Astrid," he said carefully, "go to your chambers. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except Mira or myself." "What's happening?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Who is Lucian Nightshade?" "An alpha who has long coveted what isn't his." Bastian's jaw tightened. "He and Fenris have been allies for years. If he's here now, demanding to discuss stolen property." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "He's here for me," Astrid breathed. This was planned. All of it was planned. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. Fenris hadn't given her to Kale out of simple cruelty or jealousy. There had been a reason behind his actions, a scheme she was only now beginning to understand. And Lucian Nightshade was at the center of it. "Go," Bastian commanded, his voice brooking no argument. "I will deal with this messenger. I will find out what Lucian wants, and I will protect you from whatever is coming, but I need you safe while I do it." Astrid wanted to argue. She wanted to stay, to hear what the messenger had to say, to understand the full scope of the danger closing in around her. But the look in Bastian's eyes, desperate, fierce, terrified, made her swallow her protests. "Be careful," she said instead. Something flickered across his scarred face. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. Always. She fled the council chamber on unsteady legs, her mind racing with questions she couldn't answer. The castle corridors seemed darker than before, the shadows deeper, the whispers of passing servants more ominous. By the time she reached her chambers, her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Mira was waiting inside, her kind face creased with worry. "My lady, what's happened? You look as pale as moonlight." "Lock the door," Astrid gasped, sinking onto the bed. "Please, Mira. Lock it and don't open it for anyone." The healer moved quickly, sliding the heavy iron bolt into place with a solid thunk. "There. We're secure. Now tell me what's frightened you so." Astrid's hands trembled as she pressed them against her belly. "There's a messenger here. From the Nightshade Pack. From an alpha named Lucian." Mira's face went pale. "Lucian Nightshade is here? At Stoneheart? You know him. Everyone knows him." The healer's voice had gone quiet, haunted. He's been a thorn in King Bastion's side for years, always pushing at the borders, always scheming for more power. There are rumors that he wants the Stoneheart throne itself, that he believes he should rule all the northern territories. A cold dread settled in Astrid's stomach. And now he's allied with Fenris, with my former mate. Allied how? I don't know yet. Astrid shook her head, fighting back the panic that threatened to overwhelm her. But the messenger said something about stolen property, and I think they mean me. Mira sat beside her on the bed, taking Astrid's cold hands in her warm ones. You are not property, child. You never were, no matter what any wolf has told you. That's what Bastion said. The words came out choked, barely audible. He said I would never be given away again. Only chosen. And he meant it. Our king is many things, stubborn, scarred, haunted by prophecy, but he is not a liar. If he has claimed you as his mate before the council, he will defend that claim with his life. That's what I'm afraid of. Astrid whispered. I don't want him to die for me. I don't want anyone else to suffer because of what Fenris and Lucian have planned. But even as she spoke the words, she felt the mate bond pulse with something she hadn't expected. Not fear, not despair, but fierce, burning determination, and it wasn't coming from her. It was coming from Bastion. Through the bond, she could feel him preparing for battle. Not physical battle, not yet, but the battle of wills and words that would determine whether war came to Stoneheart. And underneath his iron control, she felt something that made her heart ache with its intensity. Protectiveness. Rage at anyone who would threaten what was his. And beneath it all, the desperate hope that he might somehow be worthy of the mate the moon goddess had given him. He was fighting for her. And Astrid realized, with startling clarity, that she wanted him to win. The hours that followed were agony. Astrid paced her chambers like a caged animal, unable to eat the food Mira brought, unable to rest despite her exhaustion. The mate bond was a constant presence in her chest, a tether connecting her to Bastion across the stone walls of the castle. She felt flickers of his emotions, cold anger, calculated strategy, moments of barely suppressed violence, but she couldn't see what was happening. The waiting was unbearable. When the knock finally came, she nearly jumped out of her skin, but Mira checked through the small viewing slot in the door and nodded. It's the king. Astrid's hands shook as she helped slide back the bolt. Bastion stood in the corridor, his face a thundercloud of barely contained rage, but when his eyes found hers, something in his expression softened, just for a moment. Just enough for her to see the man beneath the alpha. You're safe, he said, and it sounded almost like a prayer. What happened? What did the messenger say? Bastion stepped into the chamber, closing the door behind him. He moved to the window, staring out at the darkening sky as if he couldn't bear to look at her while he spoke. Lucian Nightshade has made his intentions clear. He claims that you were promised to him as part of an alliance between his pack and Silverbrook. He says that Fenris gave you to Kale as a temporary measure, a way to transport you to Nightshade territory without raising suspicion, and he is demanding that I return his rightful property immediately or face the consequences. The words hit Astrid like physical blows, each one driving the breath from her lungs. Promise to him? That's not possible. Fenris never mentioned. Of course he didn't. Bastion's voice was bitter. Because the arrangement was never about you, Astrid. It was about what you carry. My child? Her hands flew to her belly, instinctively protective. Your bloodline. Bastion finally turned to face her, and she saw the terrible truth in his eyes. Lucian's messenger was quite forthcoming once I made it clear I wouldn't be intimidated. It seems that your parents, the ones you thought were simple pack members, were actually the last surviving heirs of the Windrider royal line, a dynasty that was supposed to have died out generations ago. The room spun. Astrid gripped the bedpost to keep from falling. That's impossible. My parents were nobody. They died when I was a child. There was nothing special about... She stopped, the denial dying on her lips. Her mother's hands on her forehead, the strange words, the burning in her chest before her wolf went silent. To protect you. My mother, she breathed. She knew things. Did things no ordinary wolf should have been able to do. She bound my wolf when I was a child. I never understood how. On the contrary, they were so special that someone went to great lengths to hide them, to erase their lineage from the records. But Lucian's spies discovered the truth years ago. He's been watching you ever since, waiting for the right moment to claim you. And the right moment was when I became pregnant. Astrid's voice cracked. Because my child. Your child carries royal blood. Magic blood, according to the old texts. The Windrider line was known for their ability to manifest the moon goddess's power in physical form. If Lucian were to mate with you, to claim your child as his own, he would have a legitimate claim to any throne in the northern territories. Astrid finished the thought, horrified. That's why Fenris gave me away. He found out about my bloodline, and instead of protecting me, he sold me to his ally. For power, for position, for whatever Lucian promised him in return. Bastian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. The public rejection was deliberate. It gave Fenris deniability. If anyone questioned why you ended up in Lucian's hands, Fenris could claim he knew nothing about it. He gave you to Chaol. Chaol lost you in the wilderness, and Lucian's scouts conveniently found you. No one could trace the transaction back to Silverbrook. But I ran before they could. You disrupted their plan. Chaol was supposed to escort you directly to Lucian, not let you escape into the snow. Your former mate never cared about you, Astrid. He only cared about what you could give him. And when he realized the full extent of your value, he chose to profit from it, rather than honor the bond between you. Tears burned in Astrid's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She was so tired of crying, so tired of being the victim of other people's schemes. So what happens now? Does Lucian get what he wants? No. The word was absolute, final, spoken with the weight of a king's authority. Lucian Nightshade will never touch you, not while I draw breath. But he'll bring war to your doorstep. Your people will suffer because of me. My people will fight to protect their Luna. Bastian crossed the room in 2 strides, standing close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. You are my mate, Astrid. The moon goddess chose you for me, and I will not let anyone take you away. Not Fenris, not Chaol, and certainly not Lucian Nightshade. The prophecy. Damn the prophecy. His voice cracked with emotion. I have spent 10 years of my life cowering from words spoken by a seer who is long dead. I have denied myself connection, companionship, love, all because I was afraid of what might happen if I let anyone close. And now that you're here, now that I've felt the bond, I realize that living in fear is no life at all. He reached for her face, cupping her cheeks in his scarred hands. His touch was impossibly gentle, reverent, as if she were something precious that might shatter at the slightest pressure. If you are meant to destroy me, he said softly, then I will welcome it. Because these few days with you have been worth more than all the lonely years that came before. Astrid's breath caught in her throat. She stared up at him, at the scars that mapped his face, at the vulnerability shining in his green-gold eyes, and she realized that somewhere in the chaos and terror of the past days, something had changed inside her. The wall around her heart wasn't just crumbling, it was gone. Bastian, she whispered, and his name felt right on her lips, like a word she had been waiting her whole life to speak. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. I won't force anything between us. I know you've been through more than anyone should have to endure, but I want you to know that I am here. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, I am here. She should have pulled away. She should have remembered all the reasons this was dangerous, all the ways this could end in destruction and heartbreak. But when he looked at her like that, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, she found that she didn't want to remember. Instead, she leaned into his touch. She let herself feel the warmth of his hands, the steady pulse of his heartbeat resonating through their tether, the desperate hope that mirrored her own. "I'm not ready," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "For everything. For the claiming, the marking, all of it. I'm still so broken, Bastian. I don't know if I can ever be what you need." "You already are." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, their breath mingling in the narrow space between them. "You are already everything I need. The rest will come in time, or it won't. But I will be here either way, waiting, hoping, for as long as you'll let me." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in the fragile peace of their connection. Astrid felt the mate bond humming between them, growing stronger with every shared breath. It was terrifying and wonderful, and unlike anything she had ever experienced. For the first time in months, she felt like she might actually be safe. The peace shattered 3 hours later. Astrid had finally managed to sleep, curled up in the massive bed with Mira keeping watch by the door. Bastian had left to organize the castle's defenses, promising to return before dawn. The mate bond pulsed steadily in her chest, a constant reminder that he was close, that he was fighting for her. And then the world exploded. The sound of shattering stone woke her instantly, a deafening crash that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Screams followed, the high-pitched wails of wolves in terror, and beneath it all, the guttural roar of attackers breaching the walls. "Get up!" Mira was at her side in an instant, pulling her from the bed. "We have to move now. What's happening?" Lucian didn't wait for an answer. The messenger was a distraction. While we focused on him, Lucian's forces were already positioning around the castle walls. They're attacking now. Through the bond, Astrid felt Bastian's surge of rage and fear. He was fighting somewhere in the castle. She could sense it. The fierce focus of battle. The pain of wounds being inflicted and received. He was hurt. She could feel it like fire along her own nerves. "Bastian, we can't help him if we're dead." Mira pressed a knife into Astrid's trembling hands. "There's a passage behind the fireplace. It leads down to the caverns beneath the castle. We need to—" The door exploded inward. Astrid screamed as wolves poured into the chamber, their eyes gleaming with violence. Behind them strode a figure she didn't recognize, tall and golden-haired, with a cruel smile that made her blood turn to ice. "Ah, there you are." Lucian Nightshade's voice was silky smooth, pleasant as poison. "I've been looking everywhere for my property." Mira threw herself between them, brandishing a surgical knife. "She belongs to King Bastian now. The mate bond is irrelevant." Lucian flicked his wrist, and one of his wolves seized Mira, throwing her against the wall with enough force to crack stone. The healer crumpled, unconscious or dead. "No!" Astrid lunged toward her, but rough hands caught her arms, dragging her back. "Let me go. Let me—" "Quiet." Lucian stepped close, his golden eyes raking over her with possessive hunger. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble, little Windrider. Forcing me to accelerate my timeline, to launch an assault on a fortified castle. I hope you're worth it." His hand closed around her throat, not quite choking, but holding her immobile. Such power hiding in such a fragile vessel. Fenris was a fool to let you go, even temporarily. But his loss is my gain. "Bastian will kill you for this," Astrid spat. "Bastian is currently bleeding out in the Great Hall, surrounded by my best fighters." Lucian's smile widened. "He won't be killing anyone. Not tonight. Not ever again." Through the bond, Astrid felt Bastian's pain spike, sharp and desperate and weakening. He was falling. He was dying. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. Lucian dragged her toward the shattered doorway, his wolves closing in around them. "Come along, little queen. It's time to claim what's rightfully mine." The mate bond screamed in her chest, a keening wail of loss and rage and unbearable grief. And somewhere deep inside Astrid, something ancient and powerful began to wake. The power surged through Astrid like liquid fire, burning away every trace of the broken, discarded woman she had been. It roared up from some ancient place deep within her blood, a legacy she had never known she carried, and it demanded release with a fury that shook her to her very core. Lucian's hand was still wrapped around her throat when the first wave hit him. Golden light exploded outward from Astrid's skin, not gentle or warm, but blazing and fierce. The concentrated fury of a bloodline that had ruled these lands before the current pacts had even existed. Lucian's grip shattered as the force threw him backward, his body crashing through the doorframe he had been dragging her toward. His wolves scattered, yelping in pain and confusion as the light seared their eyes. What? Lucian staggered to his feet, his golden hair singed, his handsome face twisted with shock. That's not possible. The Windrider line died out centuries ago. Apparently not. The words came from somewhere outside Astrid, spoken in a voice she barely recognized as her own. It was deeper, richer, thrumming with power that made the very stones of the castle vibrate. My mother never told me what we were. She thought hiding would keep me safe. She stepped forward, and the light moved with her, a corona of blazing gold that filled the shattered chamber with its radiance. Through the bond, she felt Bastion's consciousness flicker. He was still alive, still fighting, but fading fast. She had to end this quickly. You can't maintain that indefinitely, Lucian said, regaining his composure with visible effort. His wolves were regrouping behind him, dozens of them filling the corridor, their eyes reflecting the golden glow. You've never trained with that power. You don't know how to control it. Eventually, you'll exhaust yourself, and when you do, I'll be waiting. Then I suppose I'll have to end this before that happens. Astrid didn't understand how she knew what to do. The power moved through her like instinct, like breathing, like the mate bond that pulsed in her chest. She raised her hands, and the light coalesced into a shield between them, a wall of pure radiance that crackled with barely contained energy. You can't kill me, Lucian sneered, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now. You're an Omega, a pregnant Omega. You don't have the strength to. I was never an Omega. The truth of it resonated through her entire being. I was suppressed, hidden. My mother, she was Windrider too, and she bound my wolf when I was a child, trying to protect me from those who would use my power, but she's awake now. And she was. For the first time in Astrid's life, her wolf was fully present, not the weak, cowering creature Fenris had mocked, but something ancient and magnificent, a silver beast with eyes like starlight who stood at the core of Astrid's being and howled with triumphant fury. Lucian's composure cracked. You're lying. The binding ritual is irreversible. Everyone knows. Everyone was wrong. Astrid took another step forward, and the shield moved with her, forcing Lucian and his wolves back. My mate broke the binding when he recognized me. The bond was stronger than whatever chains my mother put in place, and now there's nothing holding me back. She could feel Bastion through their connection, could sense him rallying at her words. He was wounded, badly, but he wasn't dead. He was fighting his way toward her, drawn by the bond and the blazing beacon of her power. Hold on, she thought, sending the message through their link. I'm coming. His response was a surge of fierce love and desperate hope. Hurry. You think that pathetic bond will save you? Lucian laughed, but the sound was strained. Bastion is dying. My warriors have him surrounded, and when he falls, you'll belong to no one, which means you'll belong to whoever is strong enough to claim you. I belong to myself. Astrid's voice rang through the corridor like a bell. I was never property to give. I was never a prize to be won or a vessel to be used. I am Astrid of the Windrider line, and I choose my own fate. She pushed the shield outward, driving Lucian's wolves back toward the great hall, where she could feel Bastion struggling. The power was draining her. She could sense it, like water flowing out of a cracked vessel, but she had enough left for what needed to be done. The great hall was chaos when she arrived. Bodies littered the floor, wolves from both sides fallen in the brutal fight. In the center of the carnage, Bastion stood surrounded by enemies, his massive form covered in blood, both his own and others. He was magnificent even in his wounds, his golden eyes blazing as he fought with the fury of a cornered king. But there were too many of them. For every wolf he struck down, two more took its place. His movements were slowing, his strength flagging. Without intervention, he would fall within minutes. Bastion! Astrid's voice cut through the sounds of battle and his head whipped toward her. Through the bond, she felt his surge of terror at seeing her in danger, followed immediately by awe at the power blazing around her. Astrid, run! Get out of here! I'm done running. She extended the shield, pushing it outward in all directions. It crashed into Lucian's wolves like a physical force, throwing them away from Bastion, creating a clear space around the wounded king. The effort cost her. She felt her vision blur, felt her knees threaten to buckle. But she held on. Bastion staggered toward her, his face a mask of blood and desperation. What are you doing? You can't sustain this. You'll kill yourself. I'm not going to lose you. She caught his arm as he reached her, steadying him, feeling his wounds through the bond as if they were her own. I didn't come this far to watch you die. Touching. Lucian's voice cut through the chaos. He had recovered from her initial assault and was striding toward them, his own wolves parting to let him pass. But ultimately futile. You may have power, little Windrider, but you don't have the training to use it. And Bastion is already half dead. This ends only one way. Astrid's shield flickered. The power was draining faster now, pulled thin by the effort of maintaining the barrier. She had minutes left, maybe less. He's right, she said quietly to Bastion. I can't maintain this much longer. Then let it go. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Let me fight. You can barely stand. I can stand long enough. His golden eyes met hers, and through the bond, she felt the depths of his love, his determination, his absolute refusal to let her fall. Drop the shield when I tell you. I'll handle the rest. Bastion, trust me. He squeezed her hand. Please, Astrid, trust me. She looked into his eyes and saw the same wolf who had knelt before her and asked permission to be hers. The same king who had protected her when she was broken and lost. The same mate whose bond burned in her chest like a second heartbeat. Always, she whispered. Lucian was almost upon them now, his smile widening as he sensed her power failing. Surrender now, and I might let your precious king live. He'd make an excellent hostage. His pack would do anything to get him back, including accepting me as their new... Now, Bastion growled. Astrid dropped the shield. The golden light winked out, and for a moment darkness rushed in to fill the void. Lucian lunged forward, triumph blazing in his eyes, his jaws already shifting to wolf form as he leaped for Astrid's throat. He never reached her. Bastion moved faster than should have been possible for a man so wounded. He caught Lucian mid-leap, one massive hand closing around the other alpha's throat, and slammed him to the ground with enough force to crack the stone floor. You made one mistake, Bastion snarled, his voice barely human. You threatened my mate. Lucian struggled, his partially shifted form writhing in Bastion's grip. The prophecy, he choked out. She'll destroy you, everyone knows. The prophecy said she would be my destruction. Bastion's hand tightened and Astrid heard bone creak. It never said that was a bad thing. You fool. Lucian's golden eyes bulged as his airway compressed. You stupid, love-blind fool. I was trying to save you. If you claim her, if you complete the bond, there's no going back. She'll change everything you are. Good. Bastion's other hand came up, claws extending. I was tired of who I was. The killing blow was swift and brutal. Bastion's claws tore through Lucian's throat in one savage strike, severing artery and windpipe in a spray of crimson. Lucian's body convulsed once, twice, and then went still, his golden eyes glazing over as the life fled from them. For a long moment, silence held the great hall. Lucian's wolves stared at the body of their fallen alpha, frozen in shock and uncertainty. Bastion rose slowly, covered in blood, his golden eyes sweeping across the assembled enemies. "Your alpha is dead," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You have a choice. Surrender now and be absorbed into the Stoneheart Pack, or continue fighting and join him." One by one, Lucian's wolves dropped to their knees. Astrid felt the tension drain out of her body as the last enemy wolf submitted. It was over. After everything, the rejection, the exile, the terror and the running, it was finally over. Her knees gave out. Bastion caught her before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her with desperate tenderness. "Astrid, Astrid, look at me. Are you hurt? Is the baby—" "I'm fine." She managed a weak laugh, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. The baby kicked against her palm, strong, insistent, unharmed. "Just exhausted. Apparently using ancient bloodline magic for the first time takes a lot out of you. But she's fine, I can feel her. I think the magic protected her too." "You magnificent, terrifying woman." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. Through the bond, she felt his overwhelming relief, his desperate love, the fierce joy of having survived together. "You saved me. You saved all of us. We saved each other." She pulled back enough to look at his face, to trace the familiar scars with trembling fingers. "Is Mira being tended to? She's badly hurt, broken ribs, a cracked skull, but our healers say she'll recover with time." His voice was heavy with guilt. "She nearly died protecting you." "She's stronger than she looks," Astrid whispered, remembering the fierce determination in the older woman's eyes as she'd thrown herself between Astrid and Lucian's wolves. Bastion's hand came up to cup her cheek, wiping away tears she hadn't realized had fallen. "It's over, Astrid. Lucian is dead. His wolves have surrendered, and Fenris—" He paused, something dark crossing his expression. "Fenris will never touch you again. I'll send warriors to his pack within the week. He'll be stripped of his position and exiled." "Good." The word came out fierce and satisfied. Fenris had thrown her away like garbage, had given her to Kael like she was property to be disposed of. Let him know what it felt like to be discarded. "My king." One of Bastion's warriors approached, his head bowed respectfully. "The castle is secure. What are your orders?" "Tend to the wounded. Lock down the remaining enemy wolves until they can be processed. And send word to the other packs. Lucian Nightshade is dead, and any wolf who supported his schemes should reconsider their allegiances quickly." "Yes, my king." The warrior hesitated. "And the lady?" "She is not a lady." Bastion's arm tightened around Astrid. "She is your queen. Treat her accordingly." The warrior's eyes widened, but he bowed deeply. "Yes, my king. My queen." He hurried away, and Astrid turned to stare at Bastion. "Queen? We haven't even— the bond isn't—" "I know." He helped her to her feet, keeping one arm around her waist for support. "I know you said you weren't ready. I know there's still so much between us that needs to be healed. But I nearly lost you tonight, Astrid. I felt you through the bond, felt your terror and your courage and your impossible power, and I knew with absolute certainty that I cannot live in a world without you in it." "Bastion, you don't have to answer now." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle despite the blood still streaking his face. "I'll wait as long as you need, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I will claim you as my mate and my queen, without a moment's hesitation." Astrid looked up at this scarred, wounded, magnificent wolf who had protected her when she was broken, who had faced down a prophecy for her, who had killed for her, and would have died for her. She thought about everything she had been through, the rejection, the terror, the long dark months of being treated like worthless property. She thought about how far she had come, how much she had survived, how the broken pieces of herself were slowly coming back together. And she thought about the bond burning in her chest, the connection that had awakened her dormant wolf and shattered the chains her mother had placed around her power. She thought about how it felt to be near him, to touch him, to know that someone saw her, truly saw her, and wanted her anyway. "I don't want to wait," she said. Bastian went completely still. "Astrid, I've spent so long being afraid, being careful, being broken." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the scar that crossed his cheek. "But when I felt you dying through the bond, I knew. I knew that waiting was just another form of fear. And I'm done being afraid." His breath caught. Through the bond, she felt his desperate hope warring with his determination to give her space. "You're exhausted. You've just been through trauma. I don't want you to make a decision you'll regret." "The only thing I would regret," she said quietly, "is losing you before I had the chance to be truly yours." For a long moment he simply stared at her. Then something shifted in his expression, something fierce and tender and absolutely certain. "Are you sure?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. "Once I mark you, there's no going back. The bond will be permanent, unbreakable." "I know. And you want this? You choose this?" "Not because of the prophecy or the power or anything except, I choose you." She rose onto her toes, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that said everything words couldn't express. "I choose us. Now take me somewhere private before I scandalize your entire pack." His laugh was broken and joyful, and he swept her into his arms without another word. The chamber he carried her to was his own. She could tell by the scent of him that saturated every surface, pine and winter and something uniquely Bastian. Moonlight streamed through tall windows, silvering the massive bed and the furs piled upon it. It was a room meant for a king, but when he set her down on the soft pelts and knelt before her, he looked at her like she was the royalty. "I never thought I would have this," he confessed, his hands gentle as they cradled her face. "The prophecy hung over me for so long. Every time I imagine finding my mate, I imagine destruction, loss, pain. And now I understand." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. "You did destroy something, Astrid. You destroyed the lonely, bitter wolf I had become. You destroyed my certainty that I would always be alone. You destroyed every wall I had built around my heart." "Good." She smiled through the tears streaming down her face. "You were hiding behind those walls, and you deserve so much better than hiding. So do you." His thumb swept across her cheekbones, wiping away her tears. "No more hiding for either of us. From this moment forward, we face everything together." He kissed her then, not the gentle, tentative kisses they had shared before, but something deeper, more demanding. She felt the mate bond surge between them, responding to the intention behind the embrace, preparing for what was to come. Her wolf howled with anticipation, with joy, with the fierce certainty that this was right. This was meant. This was home. "Tell me if you want me to stop," he murmured against her lips. "At any point, for any reason. I will never take anything from you that you don't freely give." "I know." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes, those molten gold depths that had haunted her dreams since the moment they met. "That's why I'm giving you everything." She tilted her head to the side, baring her throat in the ancient gesture of submission and trust. The junction of her neck and shoulder gleamed pale in the moonlight, unmarked, waiting. Bastian's growl was low and possessive, vibrating through their connection until she felt it in her own chest. "Astrid, mark me," He needed no further invitation. His mouth found her neck first, pressing hot kisses along the line of her pulse. She felt his breath against her skin, felt the slight scrape of teeth as his fangs extended. The anticipation was almost unbearable, a building pressure that made every nerve ending sing. When his fangs pierced her flesh, the pain was white-hot and immediate. A flash of agony that made her cry out, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt. But the pain lasted only a moment before it transformed into something else entirely. Pleasure flooded through her, intense and overwhelming, as the bond between them roared open like a dam breaking. She felt him, felt everything. His centuries of loneliness, his desperate hope, his fierce protective love that burned like a bonfire in his chest. She felt his joy at finally finding her, his terror at almost losing her, his absolute determination to spend the rest of his life making her happy. She felt his wolf, massive and silver, pressing against her own with something like reverence. And deeper than all of that, she felt their bond. No longer a thread or a chain, but a living thing, a connection so profound it rewrote the very essence of who they were. They were separate and together, two souls that had found their other half. Bastian released his bite with a shuddering groan, his tongue sweeping over the wound to soothe and seal it. Astrid, my mate. Not yet. She was trembling, drunk on the sensations flooding through their newly forged link, but she knew what came next. What had to come next? I haven't marked you. His breath caught. You don't have to. I want to. She pulled him down until she could reach his neck, until the strong column of his throat was exposed before her. You're mine too, Bastian. I want everyone to know it. Her wolf surged forward, lending her the strength and the instinct. She felt her own fangs extend, something that had never happened before, something that should have been impossible for the weakened creature she had been, and she bit down hard. Bastian's roar of pleasure echoed off the stone walls. Through the bond, she felt his ecstasy as their connection doubled, tripled, became something almost too intense to bear. She tasted his blood on her tongue, felt his heartbeat thundering against her lips, and knew with absolute certainty that they were bound, permanently, irrevocably, forever. When she released him, they were both shaking. He pulled her into his arms, cradling her against his chest, and she felt the rapid thrum of his pulse against her cheek, felt it as if it were her own. Mine, he whispered, his voice wrecked. Yours, she agreed. Mate. They held each other as the bond settled between them, no longer a desperate pull, but a quiet warmth, a steady presence. Astrid felt tears streaming down her face again, tears of joy, of relief, of the profound peace of finally belonging somewhere. To someone. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. I can feel everything you're feeling. And I can feel you. His hand came up to cover hers. Your happiness. Your exhaustion. Your... He paused, something wondering crossing his expression. Your daughter. Astrid's breath caught. You can feel her? She's part of you, part of the bond now. His other hand moved to her rounded belly, pressing gently. She'll be ours, Astrid. Raised as our daughter. Heir to both our bloodlines, if you'll allow it. The tears came faster. You would claim her? Even though she's not... She is mine. His voice was fierce, absolute. Any child of yours is my child. Any pup you bear will be raised in my arms. I don't care about blood or lineage or any of the politics other wolves worry about. She is ours. Astrid sobbed, burying her face in his chest. She had been so afraid that even if Bastian accepted her, he would reject the child she carried, the child of her false mate, the reminder of everything Fenris had done to her. But Bastian accepted everything, wanted everything. I love you, she managed through her tears. I know it's too soon. I know we've barely... I love you too. He pressed a kiss to her hair, then another to her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I loved you from the moment I felt the bond. I loved you more with every brave, impossible thing you did. And I will love you until my last breath. Astrid of the Windrider line. My mate. My queen. My everything. They stayed tangled together until exhaustion finally claimed them, wrapped in furs and each other, the mate bond pulsing between them like a second heartbeat. 3 weeks later, Astrid stood before the combined packs of Stoneheart and what remained of Lucian's scattered wolves, wearing a gown of silver and gold that matched the crown Bastian placed upon her head. Her hands still trembled slightly when she was tired, a lingering reminder of the power she had channeled, and Mira had warned her it might take months before her body fully recovered from manifesting magic she'd never been trained to use. Astrid Windrider, he announced, his voice carrying across the great hall. Last of the Windrider royal line, chosen mate of King Bastian Stoneheart, Luna Queen of the Northern Territories. The assembled wolves dropped to their knees and Astrid felt the weight of it, the responsibility, the honor, the absolute rightness of standing at Bastian's side. Mira was there in the front row, still bearing the fading bruises from her injuries but beaming nonetheless, tears streaming down her weathered face. She moved carefully, her ribs were still mending, but she had refused to miss this moment. She had been the first to offer her loyalty to the new queen, and Astrid had named her chief healer of the royal household. Fenris was not there. Word had reached them a week ago that he had been stripped of his alpha title and exiled from his pack, forced to live as a lone wolf in the wilderness. Kale had met an even worse fate, challenged to a duel by one of Bastian's warriors and killed in single combat. The pack that had discarded Astrid as worthless had learned exactly how valuable she truly was. Rise, Bastian commanded, and the wolves obeyed. Today begins a new era for our people, an era of unity, of strength, of bonds that cannot be broken. He reached down and took Astrid's hand, raising it for all to see. My queen carries the heir to both our lines. My daughter will be raised to lead with wisdom and compassion, as her mother does. Astrid felt their daughter kick, felt Bastian's surge of joy echo through their mate link as he felt it too. In a few months, their family would be complete. But for now, this moment was enough. Standing in the sunlight with her mate, surrounded by wolves who called her queen, feeling the peace she had never dared hope for settling into her bones. Later that evening, they stood together in the garden where they had first spoken, where Bastian had shown her the moonflowers and promised to wait for her as long as she needed. I still can't believe it sometimes, Astrid admitted, leaning back against his chest as his arms wrapped around her. That this is real. That I get to have this. You deserve this. His hand moved to her belly, pressing gently. You deserve everything. Their daughter kicked again, and Bastian laughed. That rare, beautiful sound that Astrid had come to treasure more than gold. She turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, feeling the mate bond pulse between them with contentment and joy. Thank you, she whispered against his lips. For what? For seeing me when I was invisible. For protecting me when I was broken. For giving me a home when I had nowhere to go. She smiled, and it felt like sunrise after a long, dark night. For choosing me. I will always choose you. He kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips. Every day, every moment, for the rest of our lives. Astrid looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the evening sky and thought about the path that had led her here. The rejection, the terror, the long, dark journey through her own destruction and back again. The prophecy had been right, in the end. She had destroyed the old Bastian, the lonely king hiding behind walls of duty and resignation. And he had destroyed the old Astrid, the broken woman who believed she was worthless, who accepted being discarded because she thought she deserved no better. What grew from those ashes was something new, something stronger, something beautiful. She was finally home, finally chosen, finally free. And as Bastian pulled her closer, their mate bond humming with shared joy, Astrid knew that she would never be lost again.